right, well, thank you everyone for inviting me to the stage. I'm super excited to speak today. So my name is Anke. I'm a senior program manager at the Stellar Development Foundation, a non-profit organization that supports the development and growth of Stellar. So at the foundation, I lead the Stellar Community Fund, and this session will actually delve into the fund's strategic shift towards leveraging reputation in funding allocation decisions. So before we dive into that, does anyone here know about Stellar? Please raise your hands. Oh, pretty good, very good. What about XLM? Okay, actually, I like that. Actually, many people know both Stellar and XLM, so usually it's like only one of them. But yeah, so actually, Stellar is an open source, a layer 1 decentralized blockchain network. And it's been around since 2015, actually before Ethereum, believe it or not, and is specifically designed to create equitable access to the global financial system. So it provides infrastructure to developers to issue assets, build applications, and deploy financial protocols. And direct access to the Stellar network is available either through a dedicated set of functions available in several programming languages, or through our new native Rust-based smart contracts platform, which is currently in testnet. And what sets Stellar apart? So apps can actually integrate with Stellar's extensive on and off-ramp provider network to get access to the world's currencies. And Stellar actually has the largest off-ramp cash-out provider network out of all blockchains out there through a collaboration with MoneyGram, where Stellar apps can actually integrate with to offer end-to-end solutions to real-world problems. So the growth of this ecosystem is led by the Stellar Community Fund, or SCF for short. And I'll be using that abbreviation, so SCF stands for Stellar Community Fund, which is an open application awards program that supports developers and startups building on Stellar. And earlier this year, the SCF supersized to foster a development on Stellar's new native smart contracts platform, which is scheduled for mainnet earlier next year. So in 2023, we already awarded over $11 million in XLM to over 140 projects. And projects can actually include anything from educational applications to developer tools to financial protocols, and can apply for up to $100,000 in XLM at a time for about 3 months long development. All right, so different from typical foundation grant programs, SCF actually draws on input from the community for both award allocation, project support, and governance. And community vote in SCF is actually an exciting time for verified members who have proven reputation in the community to signal for which projects they like most. So why community vote? So right now, SCF actually is solely funded by the foundation. So decentralizing decision-making in funding allocation is actually not necessarily a natural choice. And so why community vote for funding allocation in SCF? I have 3 reasons. So number 1, shared responsibility. It's important to fund the right projects to build a very strong ecosystem. But as we all know, this isn't very easy. So decentralized decision-making encourages a culture where decisions are made thoughtfully, considering the impact and implications of the wider community. Second, we have credibility. So the diverse viewpoints and collective wisdom of the community actually validate the choices made and enhancing the legitimacy and acceptance of the results. Third, scalability, and this is one that's very important. So as more members become involved in governance, it cultivates a stronger, more active and invested community, which is essential for long-term sustainability and expansion of the ecosystem. Now, the why is pretty clear, but the how is what's difficult, as Gitcoin founder Kevin Owocki points out in this tweet. I kind of like this tweet. That's why I put it on there, but I don't know, anyone knows this one? Anyway, yeah. So earlier this year, we actually collaborated with R&D firm Block Science to create a novel voting mechanism to power funding allocation in the Stellar Community Fund. And Block Science actually uses the following 3-phased process to design solutions to complex problems. And so starting with kind of mapping the requirements and desirables, followed by the specification, design, and integration of it, and finally, the validation of the system by thoroughly testing and simulating its performance. Starting with phase one, we've analyzed the following desirables of how funding allocation should be governed on SCF, based on both community input and prior experience with voting mechanisms. So this mechanism needs to be effective and impactful to determine projects that should receive funding. The decision-making process should be fair and really reflect community sentiment and reward beneficial behavior. It's also important that it's scalable that it avoids overwhelming voters. The process should be also transparent and publicly available. But still remain individual voter privacy, which is something that we really value, so that voters can actually be honest in their decision-making process. It should also be flexible and to be able to adapt to varying quality and quantity of project submissions each round, changes in voter activity, and also allow for easy modifications in line with the evolving needs and challenges of our ecosystem. So finally, we wanted to also this system to be innovative and actually use Stellar's technical capabilities where possible. So once we knew desirables, we needed to make some decisions on the design process of the overall mechanism, and there's a lot to figure out. So for instance, like who can vote? How are votes weighted? And also, like, are votes binary, like yes or no, or non-binary, like with matching pools? There's a lot to figure out, and we looked at the various already existing voting mechanisms out there, such as one vote per unique identity. This model is quite equitable and doesn't allow for much flexibility in like voting power weights to let's say reward experts. It's also quite difficult to check one's identity, as many people pointed out here during the conference. And unless you have a very robust like KYC type of process, it's often subject to Sybil attacks. So there's also one token, one vote, for instance. So the more token one has, the higher the voting power. It's a very popular mechanism. But as members often can buy themselves in, the system can actually cause misalignment with the initiatives due to also monetary incentives. We've also even considered a quadratic voting mechanism, which is, I guess, the quadratic funding is very successful in Gitcoin. But from a previous attempt, the community vote actually became more of a popularity contest, which didn't necessarily result in funding the right project, in our ecosystem at least. Just the ones that were really good at marketing themselves. And well, let's face it, not every developer is great at marketing. We all know it, but they are very good at building tooling. So we need to fund the right projects, which is something that's very important. So something actually that really sparked our interest was reputation-based governance, as it was something that we were already naturally doing in a more like manual type of way and somewhat worked as well as delegation. This is a very popular mechanism out there and also generally like while working to solve for voter apathy issues. Now, reputation-based governance. It involves evaluating one's trustworthiness, expertise, contribution history, and even alignment with the initiative's values to influence both voting power and or to assign membership. So in funding allocation, reputation-based governance can have several benefits, including more informed decision-making, as there could be more voting power to experts, for instance. More inclusive representation of the community, as governance doesn't need to be limited to token holders or validators, but can actually include many different types of user types. Also, it can boost boosting one's reputation can also drive intrinsic motivation rather than often misaligned extrinsic motives such as monetary gain. Another plus is that the implementation is quite versatile, so actually it can be layered with other mechanisms, and actually there's a lot of mechanisms, even the ones that were described during this conference, that use some form of reputation-based governance. And finally, I want to kind of make the note that reputation is also a very intuitive thing. So every day we make choices based on reputation without even realizing it. Where we decide like who to befriend or who to trust with the task or who to partner with on the project. We're evaluating reputations. So these judgments are quite intuitive and they're processed seamlessly by our own brains. However, translating this intuitive process into a formal governance system is quite challenging. It requires juggling many types of factors, which are often overwhelmingly complex. And another potential issue to be wary of is that influence of a certain members who've accrued a lot of reputation from the start can actually remain dominant or unchallenged over time. So how to solve for this? Together with Block Science, we've designed and implemented the first MVP of neural governance, which is a modular, transparent, and flexible architecture for defining one's voting power. Inspired by neural networks, this system mimics our brain's information processing through interconnected voting neurons. And so each voting neuron actually consists both of a oracle function and a weighting function. So the first one encodes all the core logic of the data input, and the second one encodes how it should be weighted. And so the outputs from all voting neurons are actually aggregated together in layers, and then passed on as input to the next layer until a final value is reached. So for the initial MVP for the Stellar Community Fund, we've actually implemented 3 neurons. You can see them here on the diagram. So the first one is reputation or like expertise, which are the input comes from SCF or from Stellar challenges badges that people have accrued over time. Then there's a voting history neuron, so the more like someone voted, the more times someone voted, the higher kind of that weight is. Then finally we have a trust neuron, where kind of other people can assign trust to members. And you can actually see that it's layered, so the first 2 neurons are collected before voting, and the second one is actually collected during voting. So it's a lot of flexibility, and these are actually some of the more, I guess, like 3 MVP versions of neurons. I think like going forward, we're going to see like, oh, how can we actually reflect community sentiment and reflect reputation in a bit more, of a sophisticated way. Oh. All right. So by adopting this neural network approach, neural governance can simplifies and structures the evaluation of reputations. It also breaks down the intricate process into smaller, more manageable parts. It offers a plug-and-play experience, so you can actually add, remove, or change voting neurons as part of a more adaptive governance process. And it also enables piecewise transparency. And this is something very important if, let's say, something like voter privacy is important, so you don't want to reveal the identity or the particular projects that a particular user has voted for. You can, but you still want to have the entire thing be somewhat transparent and have a public record. You can enable piecewise transparency so that some neurons might be public and others might be more obfuscated. So overall, neural governance can also be used to enable more like inclusive participation in governance, as it can also be used to determine membership. Some potential use cases include publicist funding. So neural governance has the ability to incorporate evaluation criteria beyond profit potential, such as prior network participation, prior voting history, experience with public goods, and more. And it also allows a community to easily adjust weights on those signals. Second is domain-specific expertise reputation. So similar to the one before, neural governance allows a community to set neurons for a particular governance action to be higher weighted towards individuals with a particular set of expertise, such as technical engineering work or social impact work or even academic background. Oh, almost. Third is adaptive governance. As neural governance accepts inputs at each layer, actually transforming them into weighted outputs for the next layer, it allows for cross-round adaptations. And also, prior voting actions, so let's say like project success and other outcomes, can be an important signal for future voting power allocations. So something that we're actually looking to explore is to expand the voting history neuron to take in success data of projects so that actually extra voting power goes to those who voted for successful projects in the past. Now, there are several other projects that are leveraging some form of reputation-based governance in the blockchain space. One example of that is Colony. Let me see. I accidentally clicked next on this one instead of this. All right, here we go. All right, so one example of that is Colony. And Colony is a DAO which offers tooling for others to build DAOs. Reputation in Colony is an attribute that can actually quantify a particular individual's influence. And this is calculated based on the sum of work that has been completed within a colony or DAO. Reputation actually decays over time, so members need to stay engaged to keep their status. And this is pretty important in some of the drawback that I mentioned earlier, so that people who have gotten in a colony very early on and accrued a lot of reputation actually need to kind of stay engaged to keep that status and not automatically keep it. So the other mechanism I mentioned earlier that we're interested in for SCF is delegation. So for the interest of time, I think I'm like 5 minutes out or something. I'll go over this pretty briefly as it's a popular concept. But in short, delegation allows members to entrust their voting power to another trusted actor. And the most important benefit I see of a delegation is that it reduces attention cost, technical requirements, and also administrative overhead for individuals. That said, there are some challenges with delegation, most notably the increased risk of collusion and centralization. And these are the very things that we try to solve for in blockchain. So how do we solve for that? Quorum delegation. This is, together with Block Science, we created a different take on how delegation can be done in governance mechanisms. This is called, we call it quorum delegation, which allows users to passively vote for by delegating their voting power to a quorum or a group of users. And this is actually inspired by the Stellar Consensus Protocol, which is a proof of agreement type consensus mechanism where the validators actually define their trusted quorum of all other validators in order to validate transactions on the Stellar network. So voting power in this case goes to the majority decision of the chosen delegates, who can be changed each voting round, and you can also choose to delegate per decision. So there's quite a bit of flexibility with this type of mechanism. And also, you don't need to, it's without having to reveal any information about the quorum, users can automatically vote. So these are kind of anonymized quorums, as we say. So this can reduce the attention cost for users while still allowing for pretty high flexibility. Now, I understand, it takes quite a bit of time and effort to set up these systems initially, figure out what neurons that you would like to create, figure out the weighting, figure out the parameters of these systems. I'm not going to lie, it does take a bit of effort. But to help out anyone here to experiment with the system, Block Science actually created an open source tool called CAD. Maybe some of you have known about it. But anyway, it allows for anyone to do research and simulate different outcomes. And an example of this CAD simulation is actually this one for quorum delegation. That shows kind of the delegation over time in a particular voting period. It's pretty interesting. I don't think we're actually going to have 100 days of voting, but I guess you can do the math, like it's over time, things can change. All right, so let's put it all together. SCF implemented the initial version, initial like MVP, I would say, of neural quorum governance on our new smart contracts platform. And this actually combines both the neural governance that I talked about earlier and quorum delegation. So this kind of like resembles some kind of like liquid democracy, I would say, with the best of both worlds. So on the one hand, you have the reputation inputs to determine voting power, also with the option to delegate. So if you don't necessarily have the kind of necessary expertise to evaluate a particular project, or you don't have time to like vote in a particular round, or like let's say you don't have the tier to be able to vote, but you can still delegate. So yeah, setup collectively could really solve for some of the common issues that we experience across voting mechanisms, like inaccurate community sentiment, like voter fatigue and apathy, and also the lack of growth in core group of users. By distributing voting weight in a fair way, this also will align hopefully with all of the SCF objectives that we put out. Encourage engagement by empowering members can actually help build up their reputation, and it allows for greater flexibilities on voter responsibilities, and also offers some accessibilities for newcomers. All right, so I'm almost done. Some next steps. So we've actually started early this year with the ideation and development. We finished the implementation this quarter and documented everything in several blog posts and resources. And so next up, early next year, our simulation, calibration, and adding new neurons accordingly. We've also are going to put out monthly reports based on the community vote rounds that we offer. And then, the goal is to really fully rely on this mechanism to power funding allocation by the end of June 2024. So wish luck. So if you're interested, if this was interesting to you, definitely get involved. And if you scan this QR code, it actually goes to the governance modules library, where neural governance and quorum delegation are both documented, as well as where the CAD-CAD implementation is available. If you're interested, if you're more like a builder, you're like, hey, actually, I want to like submit a project to SCF because it looks pretty cool, like Stellar, I want to know what it is. Definitely go to communityfund.stellar.org. The next deadline is January 14th. Yeah, and if you're really interested, you can become a verified member and join our Discord. So yeah, if you have any questions, I went over it pretty quickly, but definitely talk to me after the talk. And I also, like, I'm pretty active on Telegram. I think I put my name out there. I don't know, you couldn't have missed me. So definitely, like, reach out. All right, time's up, so thank you so much.